Hello, folks. Because I'm Carlos podcast, episode 17. This one is going to be called Collecting Off the Beaten Path. And it's actually going to be an extension of a video that I did on the YouTube channel. Now, this one is going to have a video component to it, but it's not necessary. I'll kind of talk through and explain exactly what I'm talking about and the general idea behind it. So I'll describe kind of everything that's going on. But if you do prefer the video element of it, you can definitely check out the YouTube channel. The link will be in the description of both the audio and the YouTube version. So you'll be able to check it out from there and see exactly what I'm talking about. And also, if there's anything visually that helps you kind of understand exactly what I'm talking my way through, then it'll probably help you out on that side of it. Otherwise, if you are on the YouTube channel, I would appreciate if you like the video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll probably repeat that at the end, but for now, that'll be it. So what I want to talk about on this one is, like I said, an extension of a video that I've already done. And variety, to be honest, but specifically what I want to refer to is my goals video, which already came up on the channel for my year end. And that's an exercise that I have every single year. And I've talked about the whole, importance to me of goals and why I do them in the first place. The reason I say this is an extension is that it's actually a little bit separate from it. And this is something that I want to make sure I clarify. It's just so that we're all on the same page. As important as I think the goals are, and they do help provide a certain structure, and they help kind of give you kind of targets and things to go for, as far as my collecting world is concerned, it's not the be all and end all. And what I mean by that is that just because something falls outside of the goals that I list, that doesn't mean that's all I'm doing as far as collecting. It doesn't mean it's the only thing I'm picking up. All the way through the course of time and throughout the years, I've always had little projects and things that I'm working on kind of in the background. And those are oftentimes separate from the goals themselves. And when I say collecting off the beaten path, I'm taking that even a step further because sometimes some of these things don't have like an obvious checklist, so to speak. So I could be working on a little set on the side where I'm accumulating some cards. I'm not like officially collecting it in the sense that I have a set timeline or something that I'm trying to do. With the goals, the point of the goals is that you've got a very defined thing you're trying to do. You've got a set timeline and you're trying to get to a certain amount of progress by the end of the calendar year. So maybe I'm trying to work on a set and I want to finish the set by the end of the year. Or I'm working on a set and I want to get to 50% or whatever. Those things allow you then to have a target to shoot for by the end of the year so that you actually can figure out how close or how far away you were from doing it and then be able to assess, if maybe you need to readjust some of your priorities. But when it comes to some of these side projects, some of these projects can take years. So it's one of those things where there's really no pressure of a set timeline. And that's the reason I like to do those as well, because they do keep the collecting side of things interesting. It keeps you from getting burned out and it gives you different things to work on. Maybe things have dried up a little bit on some of the projects you're working on. Well, you can grab your other little checklists and see if there's anything in there that might be of interest that you can definitely pick up. So the example I'm going to use for this is something that I started recently, and the card that is on the screen, and I'll describe it to you if you're only checking out the audio version. It's a 1999 Bowman Chrome Brett Favre. It's a stock in the game refractor, so it's an insert refractor from that year, and it's I do have it in a PSA 9, and I picked that up not that long ago when I was doing I was looking at PWCC, and they actually had a copy of this, but I actually ended up buying it off of eBay because the price worked a little bit better for my purposes. I just thought it was a cool card and I decided to pick it up and I've enjoyed having it and seeing it in hand. It's actually quite a neat card to look at. But part of the reason I thought to myself that it'd be kind of fun to pick up is that I've started following the Packers in the mid 90s. And around that time, Brett Favre was at the peak of his powers, winning MVPs and getting to two Super Bowls and then winning a Super Bowl as well. So kind of that mid to late 90s period was when Favre was kind of at his apex as far as the Packers is concerned. He would continue to play on for years and have some success still. They would get to some NFC championships and fall a little bit short. But this mid to late 90s period was really kind of his apex of his time when he was kind of in the center of the football side of the hobby. So it's kind of a fun little throwback to that time period. So for me, that's kind of my favorite era as far as some of the stuff is concerned. So even though I don't really collect much football, this was definitely a card. So the card that I described to you is actually a card that would be quite in line with something that I would definitely like having in my collection. And that's why I picked it up. Now, in the vein of what I'm talking about is that the acquisition of that card actually led to me thinking a little bit through going, hey, it'd be kind of fun to do a little project related to this. And as I said, the beauty of doing something that doesn't have a defined checklist is that it leaves you a lot of flexibility. And the beauty of doing something that's outside of my regular goals, I don't have any goals pertaining to this. I have no intention of starting a Brett Favre PC per se. I'm not interested in doing another secondary player PC. I'm quite satisfied with the ones that I have. And I'm not interested in working on any specific sets or anything related to that, so that's out. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't be interested in having myself a little group of Favre cards in this case that would fit under a certain category. So I just had to figure out what the parameters would be to keep it nice and narrow so that I'd have something that I could kind of chip away and work on kind of in the background. But nothing that would have any kind of a time constraint or, oh, I got to have these many by this time. Nope, it's just having a little list of cards. But since there's no set list, then I got to figure out what the parameters are. And that's what I started doing. So I started doing a little research, started doing a little bit digging, and I also started to think to myself what I thought would be fun. So kind of in the vein of this, I was thinking about that mid to late 90s period. Favre has a lot of really cool inserts and cards from that time period. There's a lot of directions I could go with it. I did pick up some cards that are kind of fun insert-wise, but I also thought, okay, I would love to have some kind of a cohesive theme. So this is where the opportunity becomes to start developing your own checklist. So, well, what kind of theme do you want? And as I started to think about it more and more, that mid to late 90s period, I thought, my favorite things usually in that period, a lot of the time, were the refractors and the atomic refractors. So I thought, okay, well, that's a theme. That kind of helps me narrow it down a little bit. So then the question became, okay, how do I compile a checklist? So like I said, the card if you're looking at the video, you're seeing it on the screen, kind of was the impetus to give me some thought, to get me down the rabbit hole of thinking about it. But now it became time to do a little bit of research. And a lot of what I'm going to show you on this video/audio thing is going to be just talking you through my process. And that doesn't mean to say that this is prescriptive. You don't have to follow anything I just said, but hopefully it either gives you some ideas, or if you've got a different way of doing it, maybe it reinforces that for you. Whatever the case, whatever value you get out of this is great with me. But I'll explain to you what my process was in building myself a little checklist of stuff like this to create a nice little side project for me to work on. Again, to keep things interesting for me in the collecting space. So let me go over, I'm going to move over to a tab for the video section, but like I said, I'll talk you through what I'm doing. So I'm actually on the Beckett.com website. As annoying as it is to navigate, you can still get some value out of it, but you certainly don't have to use this. You can use any other checklist or any other database online that'll help you. But what I decided to do first is I need to do a little bit of research. So I started thinking about that. I said, okay, mid to late 90s, Brett Favre refractors. So what I did basically is I typed in Brett Favre refractor in the search bar, and then that led me down to the pricing checklist section. I don't actually need pricing. I don't care about that. What I wanted to see is I wanted to see the list. So when I did that, I actually came to 2,146 results, which is, kind of crazy if you think about it, but not surprising because obviously as the years went by, they produced more and more and more of these inserts and refractors and all that stuff. So here's the truth. Remembering what I said a few moments ago is that I don't care about the entire universe. Like I said, I'm not interested in building a whole secondary player PC. 2,100 cards is completely unruly and it's beyond the scope of what I'm thinking. However, this is 2,146 cards that encompass everything. So that goes into the 2000s. That goes beyond his playing days and all that. Wherever he had a refractor, that's included in this list. And that's starting with the 1994 finest refractor at the beginning and then continuing forward for thousands of cards. So I actually don't need all that. So since my scope is a little bit more narrow, I could narrow it down by brand, or I could try to do a couple of years. So what I decided to do myself, and what the exercise I went through. So in this case, what you could do is you could go here and you could start hitting the check boxes on it and then build yourself a bit of a list. I'm already logged in as far as this Beckett is concerned. So I can actually take advantage of the My Collection thing. So I was able to build, organize/trade, My Collection, whatever they're calling it now. But I was able to build myself a checklist and check off all the ones that fell under that category in that mid to late 90s period. So much like a baking show, I already did that. So I'm actually going to go into my organize right now. And if you're seeing the video section, you'll see that I've got a whole bunch of lists for different things that I'm researching, working on, or whatever the case may be. And I've got a whole ton of them. But what I decided to do is I decided to create a list. And I just called it sample, Favre refractor list, really cleverly named. And what I did is I checked off all the ones that I thought might fit under this category. And what I ended up with is once I checked off the ones that were just from the mid 90s, so basically starting in the 1994 refractor one and going to the end of 1999, mid to late 90s, covering just that period alone, I ended up with a list of 78 cards. So all of a sudden we went from 2,100 plus all the way down to 78. So that's a lot more manageable. That makes a lot more sense. Now we're getting a little bit closer to a checklist that I think might be a little bit more interesting. So I could stop the process right now. And right now I've already got a much more streamlined version of the checklist. It is certainly doable. It would take a little bit of work. And again, I don't have a timetable since it's not one of my goals, but it's something I could chip away at. And maybe by the end of the year, I get to a certain point and maybe it becomes my goal for next year to finish it off. So that's a possibility. I could certainly do that. But knowing as I do kind of my collecting preferences, I know that I'm not going to be interested necessarily in all the cards on this list. I started off just keeping it very broad, started off at 2,100, and then I said, let me focus on mid to late 90s. Okay, that gets me down to 78 cards. So now the question becomes, okay, so out of the 78, am I interested in all 78 or are there some limitations on there? So what I did is I started doing a pass through of the different cards on this checklist. And as I went through it, I said to myself, okay, so the first finest refractor one, I know the design well. I'm familiar with it. Never been the biggest fan of it, to be honest. It would be a little bit pricey, but at the same time doable. But is it something that I would be interested in chasing after? Honestly, no. So that would be one that I would scratch off the list. I'd hit the check mark, send it to trash, remove it from this list, and move on. And I would keep going through all the different ones on here. 95 finest refractors, almost in the same boat. I like it a little bit better, but it is prone to getting a little bit of that greening, that hulking, effect. If any of you have seen the 1996 Topps Chrome Kobe's and how the skin tone suddenly changed and everybody becomes the Incredible Hulk. So they do have a little bit of that propensity. So I'm not a huge fan of that. They did eventually fix that problem in some of the subsequent variations. So, as the years went by, they started to fix that and it became less of a problem as you got further into the 90s. But that is one that I'd probably remove as well. So then you start looking through. Okay, how about the mystery finest refractors? Some of them are interesting, but some of them aren't. There's something like jumbo show refractors. So they're jumbo versions of these refractors, larger version cards. They're a little bit tougher to store. They'd be something a little bit annoying to have. Well, I could remove that off the list. And then there's some where you've got multiple players. So you've got the mirror images, refractors and atomic refractors with multiple players. Maybe you're interested in that, maybe you're not. So something like that you could remove. The point is, it would be whatever criteria would work for you. In my case, I went through this list and just did a couple of passes and slowly started taking off the ones that I was pretty sure I had no interest in. I did a little bit of more research in certain specific ones, found some sample images and things, and decided, oh, that one's kind of interesting. Oh, that one's kind of plain. I'm not interested in that one. And the result of that was that I quickly started to narrow this list down. So I went from 2,100 down to 78, and what I actually ended up doing, so I'm actually going to be able to switch over now to this list because I already did this exercise, and I'm actually down to a list of 24. So counting that whole time period, went from 2,100 down to 78, now down to 24. That is a much more manageable, much more reasonable list. And it actually doesn't count that 1999 Bowman Chrome insert that I was talking about at the beginning, so I would consider that number 25. So overall, a list of 25 cards that would encompass a lot of that mid to late 90s period, refractors and atomic refractors, ones that are aesthetically pleasing to me, ones that I like, or that I think would be kind of fun to have, a collection that I would enjoy doing as part of a showcase and being able to do on a video, and stuff that would just be fun to have in the collection. Again, not forcing me to have to, chase the entire universe worth of them, narrowing down a scope to something much more attainable and something that maybe I make some progress on it in the coming year. And then by the end of the year, this could be a goal for 2023. But not necessarily. If I'm busy or other things come up, well, maybe I grab a couple and then, I roll over, grab a couple the year after, and then at some point down the road, it becomes a goal. But for now, because there's no timeline to it, there's really no pressure. But it is kind of fun to have a checklist like this because now I can take this and I can print it off and have a copy of it on my desk. And if the time comes and I got a little time in between, I can do a couple of eBay searches, check out ComC and find. I was already able to find a couple and pick up a couple between ComC and eBay. So those will be coming up in upcoming mail days down the road here and just slowly chipping away at it. There's no hurry or any urgency as far as that's concerned, but it gives me a fun little diversion as far as my collecting goes that allows me to then have some fun with that. And that's kind of the point. This process here of doing this allows me to spend the time and do the research and figure out a list of things that would be interesting for me to do. And you can build your own little side, kind of side projects like this. But more than anything, it was the process. It was just understanding that, hey, I'm not trying to be overly ambitious here. I'm not trying to be, keep it too simple. But at the same time, it's got to be something that I know that I would be at least willing to give it a go and give it a try. And something like this is a project that I could definitely sink my teeth into and have some fun with. So it's the process above all else that I kind of want to share with you in this video. Now, one more thing I'll kind of throw in here at the end is that, okay, so let's say I'm able to finish this, whatever it ends up being, whatever timeline ends up being. Would I consider having this group graded? And I'm going to kind of expand on this in a future video as well. When you would select the third-party grader, which one you would select, and I'll talk you through the process. Not specifically recommending one because your mileage may vary and your preferences will vary, but I can explain kind of my thought process would be, this might be a little project here that might be interesting to have in graded form. So then the question is, do you keep them all in the same third-party grader? Are you willing to mix and match a little bit? Is it something where you would prefer one over the other? And that kind of thought process is something that can be a lot of fun because if it's for your personal collection, really what you're talking about at that stage, more than anything, is a fancy holder. But, these fancy holders can get a little bit expensive. So there is a value element to it. And, if down the road you change your mind and want to move it, well, then you might want to have a holder that will retain some value or help you be able to sell it more easily. So all these are considerations you have to have, and that's something you need to consider. For me, this may be something that I definitely would consider, but then it becomes really important that I pick carefully which third-party grader I select. And I have a little bit of an idea on that, but I'll expand upon that in a future video or episode. But anyway, hopefully you kind of understood what I was trying to get at. I started off with a nebulous idea, and this is really the big thing here. The whole collecting off the beaten path thing and the theme, the reason why I called it that is, this isn't a set. I don't have a set checklist. And this isn't a situation of me just doing a player collection where maybe I'm collecting everything or maybe I'm limiting to a certain time period. I am limiting it to a time period. I am limiting it to a type of insert, but I actually added a few more layers to filter some more, to really narrow it down to something that is a little bit more narrow and tighter. But because it's nebulous, it means I could have gone in 1,000 different directions. I didn't have to go this way. I could have kept the atomic refractors out. I could have gone with Dufix inserts. I could have gone with die cut inserts only. Like, there's no limit to the amount of themes and variants that I could have gone to. And I could have gone into the 2000s and included that stuff as well and made a much more expansive list. But the point is that having that flexibility when it's more nebulous, to me, is part of the fun of putting together a list like this. It's being able to have the flexibility to decide what is it that you want, what is it that you prefer, what is it that would make your collecting life and your pursuit more enjoyable. Because to me, the process and the pursuit of these things is a lot of the fun of it for me. So being able to do this process and now having this checklist at the end of this process means that now I've got another little project I can pursue. No time limit or timeline on it, but it means that down the road, if I finish it, it'll be a wonderful little showcase video that I'll be able to do. I'll be able to enjoy it, and it'll be part of a part of my personal collection. So hopefully you got something out of it, or at least were able to reinforce maybe your own way of doing things. I'd be interested in what your thoughts are. So if you are on the YouTube version of it, you can certainly leave a comment in the comments section, and I'll check it out and reply back as soon as I can. Hopefully your holidays are going well so far. I'm recording this on Boxing Day, so the day after Christmas, but it'll come out during the week of the New Year, prior to the year-end live stream and the concluding videos of the year. So that's it for me this time around. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're enjoying it in the audio version of it, I appreciate that as well. Leave a rating if you're able to do it in whatever version or format you're able to in that. And also, if you do want kind of the center and the hub of a lot of what I do, it is on YouTube. That's the hub for my main things. It is the Because I'm Carlos podcast or Because I'm Carlos YouTube channel. And I do include my Instagram as well in the description of all these things so that you can check it out if you wish. Anyway, that's it for me this time around. Thanks very much. I'll catch you in the next one.